Have you ever considered making a podcast? Well, Spotify has a great platform that lets you make them very easily, distribute them everywhere. You can even earn money while doing so, and it's all in one place. And the best part, it's all for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and it's really simple to get started. So you record and edit your podcast right from your phone, your computer, whichever one that you like. And then when you publish them, they distribute your podcast directly to Spotify and also everywhere else that podcasts are heard. You can do video podcasts, you can interact with your audience with Q&As and polls. And once they're up and running, like I mentioned before, you can even earn money through your podcast in a variety of ways through things like ads and podcast subscriptions. And of course, it's totally free to use. There is no catch. When I started Plant School, I used Spotify for Podcasters, and I continue to use it because I love it. It's super easy to use, and it gives me everything that I need as a podcaster. So if you have ever wanted to start your own podcast, I highly recommend that you try out Spotify for Podcasters. You can download the app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel, and here we learn about plants, how to care for them, how they work, and I keep it simple and taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can enjoy. Join me in Plant School.
Listen to the 48 Hours podcast for shocking murder cases and compelling real-life dramas from one of television's most watched true crime shows. Go behind the scenes of each episode with award-winning CBS News correspondents and producers in Postmortem, a weekly deep dive. Listen to 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome, guys, back to Plant School. Today is episode 55. I thought it would be fun, since we are getting close to Christmas, to just do something easy, right? I wanted to do the history of the Christmas tree, to really jump into everything there is to know. And I did a lot of research and spent a lot of time diving into where they came from, where they are today, and some really cool facts about them. My first question that I had as I was diving into this episode was, when did we as humans decide to bring trees into our homes, put lights on them, and little balls of plastic or little balls of glass, right? How did that start? And when I dove into this, it actually goes really far back, much farther than I had originally thought. So evergreen plants, like Christmas trees, they stay green in the winter. They have long held special meanings to humans. Not all plants keep their greenness year round, but evergreens do. And so there's evidence that ancient people would hang evergreen boughs over their doors and their windows. And many people believed that these evergreens would keep away witches, they would keep away ghosts, evil spirits, and even illness. So it was kind of like a little good luck symbol that people could have by having these evergreen boughs. And the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, and it's the longest night of the year for the northern hemisphere, usually falls on December 21st or 22nd. It has long been celebrated by mankind. So this kind of correlates with evergreen boughs because it reminded them that all of the green would return. The sun god was well and strong, and summer was going to come back. So they would put out these evergreens to remind them of that, especially during winter solstice. Just some of the specifics, different cultures that I wanted to just give examples of this happening. Egyptians, they worshiped the god Ra, who would recover from illness and bring sun and warmth. So they would bring in palm rushes or palm leaves into their homes, and palm leaves actually symbolize the triumph of life over death, which is really fitting for winter time, kind of that turn from winter to spring. Early Romans, they marked the solstice with a feast. They called it Saturnalia, and they would decorate their homes and their temples with evergreen boughs. In Northern Europe, the Druids and the ancient Celts would also use evergreen boughs on temples as symbols of everlasting life. And the Vikings in Scandinavia, they thought that evergreens were the special plant of the sun god Balder. And then also, just another last example that I'm going to give is that there were some pre-Christian pagans in Europe, and they worshiped trees, and they worshiped their deities within groves of trees. So as you can see from these very ancient cultures, evergreen trees or evergreen boughs meant a lot to them, and they celebrated this a long time ago. What cultures, decided to bring the whole tree in, not just the boughs, but the entire tree. I just imagine, it's kind of like when a kid brings a puppy home, did they just yank in a whole tree? I don't know. I've brought pets home. My mom can attest to that. We've had many cats because I brought them home. So was this the case? Someone who loved trees just brought one in? When I looked into it, the most likely theory is that Christmas trees started with medieval plays. They had these plays, they celebrated the nativity, and they were linked to the story of creation, the nativity plays. This was because Christmas Eve was also considered the feast day of Adam and Eve. So they'd have a Garden of Eden in their plays. It was very common, and they would have a paradise tree, is what they called it, and they would hang it with fruit and apples to represent the forbidden fruit, and they also had wafers in the tree to represent the Last Supper or the sacrament. Sadly, these plays were largely banned by the 16th century, so people decided to, because they loved these plays, they decided to bring in their own paradise trees into their homes. And they would put these trees, or maybe they would just bring in the boughs if they couldn't bring in the tree, and they would call them paradises. That's what they're historically called. And they would put apples on them, they would put red ornaments on them, so that's where that comes from. And those wafers that they would put in their paradise trees eventually moved to cookies, eventually moved to gingerbread that we now use today. In general, when you look into Christmas tree history, Germany is a huge part of it. They are actually credited with starting the Christmas tree tradition that we now know, and some experts think that it also may have come from Finland and spread to other parts of Europe. But there are even records all the way back to 1510 in Latvia and 1521 in Strasbourg that trees were used as symbols of Christmas. So we're talking, that's over 500 years ago that this was going on, that people had trees that were linked to Christmas. And in the 16th century, there were devout Christians that would bring in decorated trees into their homes. Some would also build pyramids of wood, kind of like a wood pile, but they would decorate them with evergreen branches and candles if they couldn't bring a tree in. So there's a popular legend that Martin Luther, the 16th century Protestant reformer, I'm sure you guys have heard of him, was the first to add lighted candles to a tree. So the story goes that he was walking home, he was really inspired and awed by the brilliant stars shining in the evergreen trees as he was going home. So once he got home, he decided to recreate this scene for his family, and he put up a tree in the main room, and he wired on candles onto the branches to kind of recreate this scene. When I had read this, it just made me think of, if this is true, which, it's probably not. This is just a very popular legend, right? But this man, by putting these candles into evergreen trees, can we hold him responsible for household Christmas tree fires? Because that is the first thing I thought. There are so many people who've had accidents because of putting candles in Christmas trees. And I actually looked this up. So according to the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, in the US alone, from 2007 to 2011, there were 230 fires caused by Christmas trees. And you think about it, we only keep Christmas trees up for a month, right? It's not a very long time we have these in our homes. So the fact that there were 230 fires caused during this 1 month of the year, I feel is pretty significant. And really sadly, these fires actually have led to 6 civilian deaths each year on average, which is really unfortunate. I don't think we can pin down Martin Luther, Protestant reformer of the 16th century, and say that he's responsible. But that aside, because of its supposed Lutheran origins, it was met with a lot of resistance. The idea of a Christmas tree with lights on it. And it was mostly met with resistance by the Catholics. It's really interesting to kind of think of that today because the first Christmas tree in the Vatican was put up in 1986. So really not all that long ago, especially when you think about how Martin Luther was around in the 16th century, supposedly putting up the modern Christmas tree with candlelight in it. This has all been happening mostly in Europe, right? So I live in the US, so I'm wondering, how did the Christmas tree spread to America? Surprisingly, in the 19th century, many Americans found Christmas trees really odd. The first record of a Christmas tree on display was in the 1830s by the German settlers in Pennsylvania. When I was researching this, there were other claims to the first Christmas tree. There was one in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. They claimed that there was a Hessian soldier. He put up his own Christmas tree while he was imprisoned in 1777. So quite a few years from that original claim in the 1830s by those German settlers in Pennsylvania. But there's kind of some questions around who had the first Christmas tree in America. There's not detailed records, right, of people saying, yeah, we put up a Christmas tree and we are the first ones. It was kind of an oddity to have it in the first place. So a man by the names of Charles Follen is thought to be the first to introduce America to the custom of decorating your Christmas tree. There was also a German immigrant in Wooster, Ohio, named August Imgard. He is said to be the first to popularize the practice of decorating a Christmas tree with candy canes. And then as late as the 1840s, the Christmas tree was kind of seen, as I mentioned before, as a pagan symbol, not really accepted by most Americans. Americans' disdain of Christmas trees partly probably came from our English ancestors, partly probably because of the Catholic resistance to it, since it was seen as maybe a Protestant tradition. There's actually a prominent member of the 1600 Parliament. His name is Oliver Cromwell, and he preached against the heathen traditions of Christmas carols, of decorated trees, and any joyful expression of the sacred event that Christmas was. Oliver Cromwell, if you could come to the 20th century, if we could just drop you down like a little Sims character, I think you would be appalled by all the Christmas carols, the trees, and the joyful expressions going on today, because it is, I think, today seen as such a joyful thing. Maybe back in the 16th century, it was more of a solemn day. There wasn't a whole lot of the stuff we do today going on. In 1659, I thought this was really crazy. This is just to show how opposed Americans might have been to Christmas trees. So there was a general court of Massachusetts. They enacted a law making any observance on December 25th other than going to church service punishable by law. So you could be fined for hanging decorations. And that included putting up a Christmas tree. So you can kind of see, this painted picture of why leading up into the 19th century, Americans weren't super familiar with Christmas trees. And like I said, the stern view was just there until the 16th century. And what started to kind of break into that was actually in 1846. Queen Victoria in England, she was sketched in the Illustrated London News standing with her children around a Christmas tree. So not very popular at this time, right? We're in 1846. And Queen Victoria was very popular. The people loved her. She was a very popular queen. And she was seen as very fashionable. So this image that was sketched, it spread very quickly. It spread to the fashion-conscious American society, mostly along, the East Coast. And so Christmas trees started to appear first among the upper classes until it became more affordable and more attainable to other people throughout the years. that kind of leads me, that's kind of the history of the Christmas tree coming into today and how has it really developed since. So electricity arrived, of course. It brought Christmas lights. Edward H. Johnson, he was the vice president of the Edison Electric Light Company, and he created the very first known electrically illuminated tree at his home in 1882. So probably was still something not very common to even see a tree inside most American homes, and he brought the first one in that was electrically illuminated. And so with this, Christmas trees started to appear in town squares as time went on in the 19th century, and it became an American tradition to have one in your home. And then also, I just had to throw this in the early 1960s, aluminum Christmas trees were very popular. I don't understand the draw, but you know what? I didn't live in that time. Maybe they were more appealing then. Kind of on that same note of thinking of aluminum Christmas trees, are Christmas trees really sustainable, like live ones? Because in my mind, I'm like, well, it seems more eco-friendly to use a reusable fake tree, right? My husband and I have one in our home. We've used it for the past 5 years, and we don't go chop one down. Isn't that more sustainable to just use this one that's fake? And looking into it, I was actually wrong in this way of thinking, and I just want to kind of explain it to you guys because I thought it was really cool. Fake trees, they are made from a product called PVC, polyvinyl chloride. It's a type of plastic, but it's also a type of plastic that's very difficult to recycle. So for the most part, they kind of just sit in waste dumps. They don't really do much. They don't degrade very well. Christmas trees, when you think about it, the very large majority of them are not taken from forests. They are grown as crops, just like, like corn, like wheat. They are grown for the specific purpose to be harvested for Christmas. That's what these farmers are raising them for. And while these trees are growing, they're not just taking up space, they're cleaning the air. They are stabilizing the soil. By that, I mean there's roots in the soil, keeping the soil there. It's not eroding and washing away anywhere else. And they are removing carbon from the air. And there's a lot of great benefits to having these big tree crops. And those that are taken from forests, usually they are federal forest, and they are strictly regulated by the U.S. Forest Service. I don't know if any of you out there have gone to cut down a tree of your own. It's a lot of fun. I've done it a few times, and yeah, I can say that they have like size requirements. They usually ask you to only choose a certain species of tree. They don't want you cutting down certain trees that may be endangered or anything like that. It's very strict regulations. They don't want any sort of deforestation going on. Another great reason to use real trees, they are biodegradable, obviously. Plastic trees, they just fill landfills, they don't degrade. One of the other benefits of real Christmas trees, they are different ways you can recycle them at the end of the season, which I was not very familiar with. So many communities, they will offer free Christmas tree recycling. They will use those Christmas trees to make mulch, to make compost or wood chips from the trees. You can recycle it yourself if you really want to. You can use it for firewood. Put it in a mulch pile, let it kind of decompose from there. Pine needles and fir needles can actually help your soil be more alkaline. If that's something you need. I know along the east coast of the United States, your soil is acidic, and making it more alkaline could be beneficial to you. Over here in the western United States where I live, not quite as beneficial because our soil is already very alkaline. That's because we don't get a lot of rain over here for the most part. You can also, I thought this was cool, you can put your Christmas tree into a pond and recycle it that way. It serves as a great refuge for fish and a source of food. And when I say this, I don't mean like go to your local fishing spot and chuck your Christmas tree into it. Please don't do that. Please don't. I mean, like, if you have a private pond that you own, you can put your Christmas tree into it, or if your neighbor does, you can ask them. Keyword ask them if you can do that, to make sure you are not dumping them in public waters. You can also burn your Christmas tree, and wood ash is really great to mix into your compost to make, some really great soil. going kind of back to how communities offer free Christmas tree pickup or things like that, some areas have curbside pickup or they'll have a drop-off recycling center. You kind of just have to check with your city government on their website or whatever, however you get your information from your city government. There are also nonprofit groups like Boy Scouts that will pick them up for a small fee. Not every Boy Scout group, what are they called? Tribe. They're not tribes. Anyways, let's move on. Boy Scouts could pick them up for a small fee. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you could probably go out and pick up lots of trees and just charge a small fee for picking up people's trees and taking them to a recycling center, right? So there you go, entrepreneur idea of the year. And moving on from recycling, so now you know that live trees are indeed best for the planet if you are interested in that, which I hope you are. Moving on from that, what is the best type of Christmas tree? Since this is a plant podcast, let's talk a little bit about what tree is used. So most commonly used species are fir trees, and this is because they do not shed their needles when they dry. I say that lightly. They probably shed some, not as many as other types of trees, and they retain a very good color and they have a great scent. So some of the very common fir trees used for Christmas time are the noble fir, the balsam fir, and the Douglas fir. Last question I have that we're going to go over are just some Christmas tree stats of today. These were really fun. I really loved these. I hope you guys love them as much as I did. So Christmas trees are actually grown in all 50 states. That includes Hawaii, that includes Alaska. You know, maybe some, not as much as others, right? The top producing states include Oregon, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Washington. So those are the top states that produce Christmas trees. There are actually 33 to 36 million Christmas trees produced in just America. That's not worldwide, that is just America. And in Europe, there are 50 to 60 million that are produced, so even more than here in America. There are about 1,500 Christmas tree farms in the U.S., which I just have to throw in. I don't think it's currently Taylor Swift's parents, but I'm pretty sure Taylor Swift's parents were once included in that number because all my pop culture videos that I've watched have told me that her parents were once Christmas tree farmers and she grew up on a Christmas tree farm. So any people who are Swifties, that was for you. That useless fact of information. Moving on, they can take as many as 15 years to grow to their typical height, so kind of a long growing time, but some other types of trees can take as little as 4 years. It just depends on the type of tree that you are growing. There are close to 350 million live Christmas trees currently growing at this very second just in the US alone. So there is more than 350 million around the world, but that blows my mind in and of itself. And then going back to how to recycle them, there are 4,000 local Christmas tree recycling programs just in the US. So hopefully one of those 4,000 is close to you if you have a real Christmas tree and you can go recycle it yourself. Lastly, 80% of the artificial trees that are made in the world are manufactured in China. So way to go, China. You definitely have the majority of manufacturing trees, fake trees, right? That was all of my facts that I came up with. I didn't come up with them. What am I saying? I researched these guys. I looked them up. They're real facts. Oh my goodness, I just discredited myself. I'm telling the truth, those were real facts. But I hope you guys have enjoyed learning about Christmas trees today, learning about their history and where they come from, how to recycle them, and why real trees are actually better than the reusable ones. Maybe I need to go switch in my reusable tree for a real one in the next years, all the years of my life. What am I saying? I gotta get rid of my fake tree, guys, after doing this podcast. I hope you guys have enjoyed this podcast and learning about Christmas trees, and I hope that you guys have a great Christmas. thank you for being here and listening today, and I hope you'll join me next week. If you'd like to support this podcast and keep it going, you can find the support link below in the description and donate. Or I have some awesome Plant School merch, including stickers, shirts, and mugs, and the link to my shop is in the description as well. And if you don't want to spend any money but still support the podcast, share this podcast with a friend, either verbally or electronically. This will even qualify you for my giveaway. Just message me on Instagram at TinnyPlant that you shared the podcast with a friend, and you'll be entered in for a chance to win some goodies. Winners will be announced on the podcast. Again, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week.